Boom, we are live. Hello. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. It is CityClips Live, and we're all focused about North Florida business and tech. And I'm excited about today's co-founder, co-CEO, Luca Conner, our guest. I believe it's 100, and if I get it right, it's 106th episode. So really awesome. Crazy that we passed over 100.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you having me on. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, so I actually got a chance to catch the podcast interview that you had with Mr. McNeese over there at Jim Moran College of Entrepreneurship. Really great interview, by the way. I was like, this kid is smart and he's a go-getter, and I have to have him on the show. So I'm so glad we managed to get you on the schedule.
I appreciate it. Once again, it's always a pleasure to talk about what I do. I love it.
Yeah, so I'll give a quick intro, of course, and then we'll dive in. So for those who aren't familiar, Luca Conner is the co-founder and co-CEO of Pack'N, a Tallahassee-based tech-enabled third-party logistics 3PL company, helping e-commerce brands scale with fast, transparent, and reliable fulfillment. An entrepreneur who started in e-commerce at a young age, still young, Luca now leads Pack'N's growth strategy, sales, and client partnerships with a focus on turning fulfillment into a competitive advantage rather than a cost center. He's passionate about building long-term relationships and helping brands. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it. You're right on the money with that intro.
I got to give credit to my team who pulled everything about you online, and then also probably a little bit of ChatGPT, I'm sure. So, okay, going back to the beginning of your story, I know you gave a shout out to your mom, which was really sweet in the interview. And did you already know at a young age you wanted to start and grow a business before you went to college?
Absolutely not. So basically, my plan growing up, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. And then my mom ended up marrying her new partner. And through that, I met basically my new extended family. One of them, my cousin now, he was in investment banking from a really young age. You know, I saw, of course, what he'd been able to accomplish for his family. I always found stock trading interesting. That was like, I guess, my first experience with any type of business. And I was doing that under my mom's brokerage account when I was 15. But I saw what he was doing with investment banking. I kind of thought, hey, this is what I really want to do. You know, the money's good, of course, but it's a high intensity environment, which I tend to thrive in, right? I do really well when the pressure's on. When the pressure's not on, that's not when I perform my best, right? So I went into high school thinking I was going to do that. And then basically, as you know, I kind of got into e-commerce while in high school, and that kind of shifted my view on things. And even my cousin, he was like, look, man, I think you're more of an entrepreneurial guy. I think you could do what job I do, but I mean, I'm seeing you do this in high school, and you know, I think you could replicate it. Of course, as you get older, you get more experience, better connections. So he kind of made me think of that. And then my current co-founder is the one that made me really get that entrepreneurial spark. And do you want me to lead into that on how that happened? Or okay, yeah. So basically, in high school, you know, Jacob, he's my co-founder. He is my co-CEO. We have been friends since we were about 3 years old, right? So we went to the same preschool, kindergarten, middle school, elementary, and high school together. And basically, in high school, I saw him doing Amazon FBA, which is essentially you have a storefront on Amazon and you're selling products where you can find a price discrepancy, whether that's from a retailer or a wholesaler. And I saw him doing that. I saw him making money. And I was also like, hey, like he's actually, you know, doing something beyond just high school. And I had great grades in high school, but I always just kind of wasn't motivated because it wasn't what I like to do. And I do well when I'm doing what I like to do. So I was like, Jake, teach me your ways, please. I will help you. I'll be like your assistant for a bit. And that's what we did. And we actually got started when I joined him when it was the summer of COVID in 2020. And he had found a big pricing discrepancy between above ground pools and what they were selling for in Walmart versus on Amazon, right? So it was kind of a perfect storm because there was COVID. Everyone was staying at home, right? No one was going out to public pools. The people who didn't have pools weren't able to. And then there was also that record heat wave. I don't know if you remember that summer. It was unbelievable. And so it created this super, super high demand for above ground pools. And I'm talking, you know, about the pretty big ones you set up. And basically, we didn't formulate this all by ourselves. We were part of like groups that you pay for to, of course, kind of analyze trends, work together. And we kind of got into that, right? So what we were doing in that first run with it, where we were going to Walmarts literally across the state. We were driving hours to clear out these Walmarts. We were taking our parents' credit cards. We'd walk in, we'd see $3,000 worth of pools, right? And these things costed about 400 each on average. And what we did basically is we'd walk in, clear out the whole store with our mom's credit cards, drive back, post it on Amazon, and they'd sell the same day pretty much. And we would sell those for 1.2K, and we'd buy them for 400, and then the cost to get it to the customer was 400. So we'd make about 100% profit margin on the money we were spending. So that was our first taste of it. I was working with him under his store. And then eventually, for tax purposes and everything, we kind of split into our own stores, but we still work together on products and everything. And from that above ground pool scenario, that didn't last forever. We got into the more sustainable way of selling on Amazon, which is wholesaler deals, like white labeling your own brands, and that really led into mostly supplements, right? So that business did really well. We each got up to 6 figures a year in revenue on our stores, and then
This was in high school.
Yeah, high school. Yeah, but the profit margins are pretty low.
Okay.
That 100% profit margin is a rarity. So we did that. Then we got to college. He went to UF. I went to FSU, and kind of at that point, college hits really fast. We both rushed fraternities, and we kind of just let it flounder, right? Because I think that's an important thing, of course, really experiencing that college experience. So that's where we got started with knowing we wanted to be entrepreneurs. I honestly owe it all to Jacob. He's the one who made me realize what I wanted to do. And I tell him to this day, like, I would probably be working in an office in New York, same amount of hours probably, but at least it's my own gig now, right? But yeah, and our experience with that, obviously being on the seller end, you could call it the brand owner end, we would use companies that do what we do today. And that's kind of what gave us the inkling to work towards starting Pack'N. And basically, once that Amazon stuff dropped off, we enjoyed college. We lived that college life, as you can call it, until our about beginning of sophomore year. And that's when Jake was like, "Hey, Luca, I've got an idea to do this. I kind of want to start doing business again." And I was like, "You know what, man? You've taken me somewhere once. I trust you on this. Let's get it done." And that's kind of where the idea for it was concepted from.
That's great. And so, yeah, very entrepreneurial. So do you what do you feel like you do better? Because obviously better, faster, cheaper is like the way to compete with some of these bigger places.
Yeah, of course. So what we do is like a service line. First off is direct to consumer fulfillment. We do have business to business capabilities. It just so happens that all of our clientele at this point have been that direct to consumer fulfillment profile, right? So basically what it looks like is they send us their bulks, mostly from China, mostly from foreign countries where they manufacture. We receive it, we quality and quantity check it, we label it because we use a barcode scanning system in the warehouse. And then it's put into storage. We have managed the inventory. And then whenever it sells on any of their sales channels, which is Shopify, their website, whatever that may be, the order is picked, packaged, and then shipped the same day pretty much. And that is not new, right? There's huge companies who do what we do. There's billion-dollar market caps, right? And the one thing is it was about 2014 when the big, you could say gold rush came around for 3PL and fulfillment. 2014 is when e-commerce really started taking off, and the big players in our industry nowadays, the big, in every industry there's the big guys, the legacy guys. That's when they got started. But I remember when I first started looking, they grew super fast. I think they hit $100 million valuation in about 2 years of being in business. So the thing is, and what we do better is, honestly, our pricing is competitive. We offer the same service. The service is just as quality, because while these big billion-dollar corporations may have the resources and the capacity and the technology and the systems that you could say is arguably more advanced than ours, they really lose touch with what makes the business good, which is working strategically, not transactionally, right? And what I mean by that is the majority of these really big 3PLs, they have 1,000, 2,000 clients, but they only really work with the top 20 to 30 in that strategic manner. The rest of it is a purely transactional relationship. So yeah, I mean, what we do better is we competitively price, of course, because we can afford to. It's not like we're underpricing our service. And on the other end of things, we just we really do take it above and beyond in that strategic manner. So we work with our clients like real partners, and that happens on the day-to-day basis with just communication, aligning, and then it happens on the overall basis of, if a client has some sort of issue and they show me it and they need a little leeway on an invoice, I'll do it for them, right? And that's not necessarily being too nice to your clients. It's when you can afford to help someone you're working with out as a partner, you do it, right? When it doesn't break the bank for you and it's not the end of the world for you, but it is for them, you make that struggle for them, I guess. And that's where we've really succeeded. I also do think that a lot of these legacy providers, and there are 3PLs who have been around for 40 years, who, they're used to the old pallet in, pallet out type of thing. And they, with this new era of e-commerce, have been trying to transition to the direct-to-consumer fulfillment I'm talking about, which is really what's pushing, right? That's like, as you see e-commerce websites, that's what direct-to-consumer fulfillment is. A lot of the times, they aren't able to catch up because they're not just focusing on building around a new era of commerce. They're trying to retrofit their old systems to fit that, right? And there's actually an example of that. So American Eagle Outfitters, they basically opened up a logistics arm, right, to do their own logistics for them. And they decided, hey, why don't we allow other companies to use our logistics network as well for fulfillment, et cetera? And that's another revenue stream. However, because it was built so heavily around this retail inventory management type of thing and not for the modern era of direct-to-consumer fulfillment, it wasn't successful. They weren't able to provide that fast, adaptable quality of service that is what really makes you competitive in today's landscape. So the way I see it is we're in a sweet spot. We're big enough to where we are able to have good technology. We have great capacity. We have a full staff. We have what we need to service the people we have now, but we're small enough to where every single piece of business we have come in matters to us. And it's my theory that as we scale, how we continue to differentiate is maintaining that same type of mindset in our day-to-day and our overall strategic direction.
Yeah, and the nice thing about being smaller, you provide great quality service and you can adapt to some of the changes that are happening so quickly. And in our prior conversation, you mentioned the 3PL industry has been around for a while, but you're more geared towards the direct-to-consumer market, which has really taken off, really, I believe, because of social media, technology, and TikTok, right? I think TikTok is huge. So I know you are open to talking about some of your clients. Do you have any clients you'd like to mention in terms of success stories?
Yeah, absolutely. So honestly, it was our first ever client, right? And we, being completely transparent, first year in business, we lost most of our money, right? At the end of the day, it was a bunch of college kids, and there used to be 4 co-founders. Now there's only 2, but all 4 of us that were together back then, literally cold calling. That's all we could afford to do, right? To try to bring in clients. And that doesn't work because it's like a 12-month long contract. It's a huge business relationship, and cold calling isn't going to work for that. But we basically contacted a former member of my fraternity, right, that we knew of that had a brand, and he has a pretty successful clothing brand. They do a few million a year in sales. So they process, tens of thousands of orders a year. And basically, we reached out. We're like, hey, man, we started up this 3PL. We don't really have any big clients right now. What do you think of working with us? And it was kind of perfect timing because they basically were moving out of a really big 3PL in South Florida that, has, like I said, that same problem. They're huge. They have an amazing warehouse, all this technology, but they don't really have that personal touch you look for. An example is, they told me they had to wait for 6 hours to get on the phone with someone a lot of the time. So they were like, you know what? And they're young. They're like 24, not much older than me. They're like, you know what? These guys, we see the same thing in us that we see in them. And they took a chance on us. We did great for them. Knocked it out of the park. It was right before the busy season, which is like Black Friday and stuff, where we got them in, and we knocked it out of the park for them. And pretty quickly, that client referred us to a couple others. Those clients referred more, and that's how we've grown. But that client, Vague Studios, it's a clothing brand. Like I said, it's all started by all FSU students, actually. They were here at FSU when they began the business. They started it close to 6 years ago now. they've been very successful with us because not only have we been able to provide them a good service from the fulfillment end of things, but they financially have grown. I believe it's 80% year over year since they've been with us. And that's not us driving those sales. That's them being able to
Wow.
drive sales harder because they know they have a reliable backend. And then it's also the flexibility, right? So obviously it's not a good thing to bend to every client's women need, but when you can work
Right.
with them, like I said, you do it. And we've been able to do that. So we've helped them with like a local screen printer in town, moving inventory back and forth so they can have better margins on their items from screen printing, things like that, I would say it's our biggest success story because they were our first real client and they're very well known in our industry. They have about 140,000 followers on Instagram. And that was honestly lucky, right? Because we proved ourselves with someone whose word means a lot in that niche. So that would say, and that client, Vague Studios, actually approached us after we bought out our other two partners, and they were like, "Hey, we kind of want to work with you and help develop this other service line for customer support because we would pay a lot of money for that if our 3PL had it." And we said, "You know what? We think you build it the best because you guys have the idea and you guys would be the ones using it, your type of company." So we made them like a minority share partner based off of their success in building that system.
Oh, cool.
Right. So that kind of just feeds into what you said. What we do better is just not only do we just genuinely have a good service, but we incorporate client input into the process in real material manner. Like an entirely new service line has been built out that's now generating close to 6 figures a year in revenue just through letting a client come in and do it for us. Right. So that's our biggest success story with the client, 100%, just because of the fact that they've been with us for 2 years now. And, there really has been nothing but benefit on both our end as a company and their end as a client as well.
One of the things I also wanted to bring up is mention like how we both knew Mitch
Yeah,
Nelson.
that's a good point.
Shout
Yeah,
out to Mitch.
so yeah,
Divvy
no,
Up.
Mitch is awesome. He owns Divvy Up with his two other co-founders. It's a custom sock company. Similar story. They were at FSU. They started their company, scaled it a ton, and it was really funny. So we're in about 7,000 square feet total, including office right now. We were in our first building, wasn't even a warehouse. It was honestly a shack in the woods. Mitch, if you're watching this, you know what we're talking about. And he owned the property, and he actually lived right next door in a house next to it. And we moved in there. It was literally just enough for us to store a couple items and make cold calls and work and have a place to work from. And he ended up being the one to rent that out to us, right? And our realtor was like, Mitch. And this whole time I'm thinking it's some, older landlord, like guy, like real estate mogul. And one day we're staying there at the warehouse because it was when the tornado hit and we had no power and we were all sleeping at the warehouse because it had power there. And I hear a knock on the door and it's Mitch and his buddies. We ended up hanging out, talking about it. And since then, he's not only been a friend, but he's been a great advisor when it comes to our business, right? So anytime I really have an important decision that for us, being 100% owners of the business and being so young and it being our first real business like this, we have no feedback loop, right? So having Mitch to call has been invaluable, but he's been a mentor, a role model because, it is really a unique situation to be in trying to build a higher scale business and a service-based business at that while being in college too. And so he's been able to provide a lot of input on that.
Yeah, talk about another success story and from the Jim Moran College of Entrepreneurship too. And you major in finance. You're a senior at FSU pursuing a bachelor's degree in finance, which also is great because a lot of business owners sometimes start without a strong finance background. So I think that's why it's good that you do have that. And the strategies you implement are very effective. So I wanted to also, because like you said, your growth was based off of a lot of word of mouth, really primarily. You guys don't do heavy marketing. I see that you guys must have used AI to put this landing page together, I think.
Which one? The website?
Yeah, the current website, is it?
Yeah, well, that was made that was made literally 2 years ago. like
Okay,
before
yeah.
we even had our first warehouse. We had someone work on it. They may have used AI, they may have not, but we plan on revamping it just because the website has been the least of our worries because we've had so
Yeah.
much growth from this referral
Mhm.
type of thing that I quite literally can't take another client on right now in my warehouse. So
Which is a good problem.
yeah, until we have more space, there's no need to touch a single thing, in my opinion.
Yeah, and speaking of, and you really don't have to, like, I've always told small business owners too, like, you don't have to spend so much money on a website or a landing page. But speaking of space, you're growing quickly that you have to eventually move. And I know you talked about it a little bit in the interview. So how are things with that? The progress with that, with your
So we've
lease?
grown a lot. Yeah. So basically, we bought out our former partners in April of 2024, 2025. So really, what is that? 10 months ago, maybe. Um, and we basically, when we bought them out, we took the company in a new direction as far as how we acquired clients, as well as just how we structured our systems, our service. We basically changed everything up on the inside, right? We changed up our pitch, what we proposed of our value proposition. And when we bought them out, we were doing about $400,000 a year in revenue, which is really not much. I think it's like 40,000 orders a year, right? Maybe 35. And basically, we bought them out and we were like, okay, let's push, 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 reach out to everyone we can. I was driving to shows, events, shaking hands, like introducing myself. And that referral pipeline really started building up and it snowballs, as you know, and we grew 500% in the last since that point, right? So we grew from 400,000 to right around 2 million a year in revenue. And that's to what we do to base that off of is we look at our clients last year of sales, we apply the revenue and gross margin we would make per order with their pricing plan, and then we just apply that for 12 months because we have 12-month service agreements. It's safe to say that revenue is going to come in unless the brand goes belly up. So yeah, we basically have scaled that much, and a warehouse runs best at 80% capacity. We're at like 110% right now, right? So we do have to move. It's a good problem to have. It's pretty daunting, right? Because what we've learned from this experience is that if we've only, and our marketing budget's like 800 a month, I pay for an RFP platform, that's it. I've learned that if we are willing to do anything more than what we're doing now, we're probably going to grow at a faster rate, logically, right? And it's scary because any lease for the size we're looking for, it's a 3 to 5 year commitment, right? And the last thing you want to do is bite off more than you can chew. But what is arguably worse is going too small because of conservatism. And then we're back in the same issue, except now if we wanted to move out again, the rent is 5 times as much to eat for that period, right? So we are moving. We have basically a couple options on the table. Either stay in Tallahassee, move to Jacksonville, or move to Orlando. Now, we'd love to stay in the town that made us, of course, but it's hard to find, property in that size range here. And it really is hard to find property. And there's we're in a weird area where the only ones that are available might be biting off more than we can chew. We got to be
Yeah.
careful not to make that decision because it's a low margin business we're in. As a whole, it's a very low margin business. Always will be. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, but that move is going to happen within the next probably month and a half. We have paperwork in hand. We're just making some final decisions. And wherever we go, we're looking at about 12,000 square feet, right? And we're hopefully getting flex options in there so we can expand rapidly. So yeah, it's definitely it's a good problem to have. Like you said, it is just very daunting, especially in a low margin business, to make such a commitment to cash flows.
Yeah. And you graduate in May. That's an intense semester. And like, do you ever worry, what about your current team based here
Well,
and everything? Like,
honestly, this is a very systems heavy business, right? So if you do
Mhm.
your job right with just the proper, training period, people are basically plug and play here, right? So
Mhm.
it's very important for management because management is the number one asset in what we do. Because look, the actual lowest level of work in what we do, it's very simple. It's packaging, it's inventory management. Really, anyone with even a high school education should be able to handle it, right? For example, Amazon workers, it's the same type of job that you do in Amazon, just a little bit different. But basically, yeah, we are going to lose our whole workforce if we move. I will say we've had a pretty, and there's the downside and a good side to it. We've had our work structure here be primarily part-time Florida State students, just because of the fact that, as we're scaling, the labor fluctuations are so like, volatile, right? And when I have college students working for me versus someone who has a mortgage and a family to feed, right? It's a lot easier to tell them, hey, I don't need you to come in today or something
Yeah.
like that. So it's been really beneficial to us to this point. However, there is the downside of course, college students aren't as reliable as those people who have mortgages to pay and families to feed. So it's a two-way street, but we are going to lose our workforce. However, the way the business is built, the way our systems run, the backbone of our company is the warehouse management, order management system. It runs everything inside that warehouse. And having the right one and the proper standard operating procedures built around it, and then good management is what allows it to be basically, you just train people right and they're instantly able to fill that role. Because the warehouse shouldn't function off tribal knowledge. And if it does function off tribal knowledge, that's when losing your base level employees is even crippling. If it operates off systems and operating procedures, that's when it doesn't really matter who's doing the work. Of course, they need to be a good worker, a good person. It is more about the management. And luckily enough, our manager is going with us wherever we go. Because
Nice.
the way we run our company, the way I talk to all my employees, even the base level one is, we're very eat what you kill, right? If you exceed, if you show effort beyond what's required of you, if you show an interest in making this process your own, you will be rewarded financially and through the work you're given, and the work will be more important, right? So that's the way I operate, and it's just about finding people that appreciate, I guess, having that type of culture, right? Because the people who appreciate it understand that there's a lot more to come out of it than just the job if you put in a lot.
Wow, that's impressive. So I know we mentioned briefly too before we hopped on live, the Florida market has about 50 or so companies. You're very aware of, like,
That I'm
competitors.
very aware of, right? So, like actual companies, so there are warehouses here in Florida that are a national corporation, right? So it's not necessarily a Florida company, but for people who do what we do, like direct to consumer fulfillment, heavily focused, I wouldn't put it at more than 50 that could actually be considered non ideation. You know what I mean? So they have a book of business, they have an operation, they have a firm way of doing things. There's a lot of people trying to do what we do right now. I mean, we did, right? We just did it 2 years ago. But yeah, I would say as far as small to mid market, which is what I'd call us, there are not more than 50. And then there's a lot of warehouses that belong to the same company here as well.
Okay. And before we conclude, because I can't believe it's already at 30 minutes almost. I'm glad you mentioned ideal customer profile, and you're pretty much at capacity right now. But what is your ideal customer?
So direct to consumer brands, right?
Okay.
Basically, these are people who they are all about selling on Shopify, right? WooCommerce is another sales channel, but it is basically direct to consumer. And these are people pushing smaller products, right? So apparel is pretty much as big as we go. And that's a lot of people who do what we do avoid apparel like the plague, because it's very high variation. There's size counts. There's all that. That's
Inventory
what
and
we got
all.
started
Yeah.
with. So you could say we kind of got baptism by fire and starting with the hardest type of client. But yeah, it's anyone who's selling direct to consumer. We don't have a hard minimum for who we take on. But the way pricing works out is there's a fixed cost associated with our service. The benefit from moving to doing it on your own to working with us is the fixed cost is lower, right? But the fixed cost associated with working with us, unless you're doing about, and this depends on what your average order value is as well, unless you're doing about 300 to 400 orders a month, it's not really worth it, right? Because you can do that on your own. I mean, that's what, packaging 5 to 10 packages a day, right? That's something you could do on your own if this is your full focus, the business, right? Now, when it comes to doing 20, 30 packages a day, right? That's where it starts to get a little bit, hey, my time could be better used on planning, marketing, designing, etc. So from a financial perspective, I mean, for us and any 3PL really, because we are pretty competitive on pricing, it doesn't make sense until you're moving into the, like I said, 300 to 400 order a month range. And then actually operationally, it's good to keep it in-house because you understand your process, right? Starting off and immediately working with the 3PL, if you're never touching the packaging, you're never taking part in that, you have no way to tell the 3PL what they're doing wrong or what they're doing right. You don't know what that huge part of your customer's journey is. Getting a full feel of it, understanding what it requires, what makes it work, what makes it better, what doesn't, is when you can then impart that to the 3PL you're working with. Because the 3PL, like I said, it's built around systems. And if there's a certain caveat or special part of your brand that needs to be worked around, that has to be communicated. You can't communicate that properly if you haven't done it yourself before, right? So I would say anyone selling on Shopify, selling, basically supplements, health products. We do, I sell for a brand. I do fulfillment for e-bike off-roading lights, right? But it's basically you're selling directly to the consumer from your sales channel on the internet. And we are not only doing the fulfillment, but we also take care of the post-purchase, right? So we take care of claims if an order is lost along the way. We take care of refunds. And then that service line I was talking about that we built as well, it's basically a complete outsourcing of customer support, right? So on one hand, you have a customer support team. On the other, you have your warehousing and logistics team. They have to talk to each other all day. There's redundancy in that communication. Things get lost in communication. Action items take longer to take. What we've done is we've centralized that all into one structure. So our people here have access to the systems directly. They're able to get it done just like that, right? And it just makes it more convenient for the client because it's one invoice, one provider, one person to hold accountable. But it turns us into not only just a fulfillment company, but a post-purchase company because we basically take care of everything from when the order leaves the door of the warehouse, which a lot of fulfillment companies don't do. And that creates gaps, that creates chargebacks, that creates, I mean, it's good. It's two systems that directly work with each other and feed into each other under the same roof and provider, which is what we're trying to build here. I guess you could say that's our differentiator besides good customer support and good pricing. That only gets you so far in any business, right? You have to differentiate in a very distinct way, and that's how we plan on doing it.
Yeah, that's less of a headache for your clients for sure.
Oh
And
yeah,
I would imagine people with followings, like influencers, that kind of thing, because they end up making their own brand at some point, and
yep,
it's a great way to make money.
yep,
So,
exactly. Yeah, absolutely.
well, I would love to conclude now. I always give guests a chance to give their words of wisdom if you wanted to say something different that you haven't already said online.
I mean, yeah, I think I said this in the last podcast, but this is a high level business, right? It involves a lot of technology. It's just any service based business. It is. I would argue that a service based business is always going to be a little bit more complicated than a product based business, just because of the fact that the service is left to be construed by both the client and the actual provider, right? Versus the product, you either like it or you don't, and you have it right there in hand. That being said, I mean, I just hope to be inspiring to other people, right, who are my age and older. And I've talked to people who are older that are like, wow, like if you could, because look, we did this with nothing. We bootstrapped with the money in our savings, right? Which, for full transparency, we invested $80,000 in this business at first. The majority of the people who do what we do, they're getting VC funding rounds for $500 to $1 million, right? And that's what they're starting off with. And there's not a lot of people who do bootstrap. So that being said, any type of business anyone watching is looking to go into, and I'm not trying to be some TED talk. It really is doable. Like it is so doable. It just takes grit and like being kind of stupid when everyone else tells you you're being stupid, and honestly having confidence in your product, because that is the main thing. If you actually believe in what you're selling, and I do all the sales for the company, it's natural, right? And then when something's natural, it's easy to get up and do it every day without getting burnt out. And that's all it is getting up and doing every day for a certain period of time until it works, and then you continue doing what's working. So yeah, that's my only thing. It's just go for it, right? We did this like with literally almost like a miracle with the resources we did it. We got down to our last couple $1,000s when we started the business, and we still hit that turn. We didn't quit when the bank was almost empty. and we were rewarded for that. So yeah, anyone who's considering starting a business, obviously be logical, but do it. I mean, you always think about what if you didn't, right? And if you fail, then you just go get a job like everyone else, basically. That's the way I say it. If I fail, I'll just go get a job. That's it.
And you learned.
Yep, I learned.
Which is great.
Yep,
That's the best thing. Like they always say, when it looks like it's the time to quit, it's actually the worst time to quit. You actually need
to
hunker down.
That's where you're being tested, whether or not you're actually, fully invested in this thing. Because if you're not fully invested, it'll never work.
Awesome. That was great. Great way to conclude. Luca, thank you so much. I want to make sure that everybody knows how to find you, because in LinkedIn, sometimes you pull up people's names and it's 10 people that pop up. So this is Luca. Follow him on LinkedIn, follow his journey. Can't wait to see where you guys take Pack'N from here.
Of course. Yeah, we'll stay in touch, and I'm always happy to come back on and chat whenever.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe CityClips will eventually need 3PL service at some point, and when you're, you have a bigger warehouse to take on more clients, we'd love to reach out to you.
Absolutely. I appreciate you having me on, Julia.
Awesome. So hold on for a few minutes. I'll see you on the other side. Subscribe for free at CityClips, guys. See you next time.